Welcome to Synced on Air. I'm your host, Angelique Robb, and today I have Evan Tachoir. Hopefully I said it right, from Jack of All People Trades. Evan, thank you for coming on the show and welcome.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Well, yeah, we only just met recently, but yeah, decided let's do a podcast. Let's get you on and introduce you to our audience because you have a unique skill in the trades when it comes to dealing with people. So maybe just introduce, a bit of your background and yeah, walk us through what you do. Go for it, Evan.
So I'll kind of introduce my background, really how it relates to the trades in snow and landscape. So I've always been in my career on the people side of human resources. So that's recruiting, onboarding, talent development, engagement. I've been in several different industries from higher ed, banking, snow removal, landscape, tech, especially pharmacy hub service. But where I really connect from the tech trade side and the, landscape snow side is kind of had a little bit of a career down point in 2019. Was in a job that really wasn't quite my skill set, was not doing well in it, was struggling and wanted to get back into recruiting. I was able to find a recruiter job with a snow company. I didn't even know what the snow industry was or that it existed, but I just wanted to get back in recruiting. And I was able to go there, and it was a small enough company that I was able to put like kind of all my people skills into play in different ways, start developing training, perfecting onboarding, all that kind of stuff. And it really led to me loving and embracing the industry. And then I had some, full-time talent development opportunities come up in different industries, but always something about snow that I just wanted to give back to. And so, that's where Jack of all people trades came in from the consulting side is, really launched that. And I can kind of get into that story if you want of how that came about officially, but, really launched that to help snow and landscape companies find, develop, and keep the best people.
Love that. Love that. Yeah, let's talk about how it came about.
So obviously, like I said, I was in the industry for 3 years, mostly snow, but I was doing recruiting full time, seasonal, which got into anybody who's been at a smaller company knows like this isn't like a big company where you're just siloed on one thing. You really can get involved in anything, especially if you have the skills. So I got involved in not only did training, employee engagement, onboarding, events in addition to recruiting, but also even got involved in some of the project management on self-perform, really putting systems in place to help us work smarter, be more organized, run meetings in a way that made sure like not just the people side stayed on task and schedule, but even that, kind of coordinated with operations to make sure they stayed on task and schedule. So I really kind of learned the operation from a higher level, even though I wasn't a field person by trade or an operator or, snow captain by trade, but I really learned a lot in collaboration there. And how I actually started Jack of All People Trades, I had wanted to consult and I had seen, so I had gone through, I left for an opportunity in tech, in talent development. But after about 10 months, got caught in a wave of layoffs. There had been a few before me, more after. Found a new job where I'm at full time now with Hub Services, specialty farm. But when I was in my new job after tech, I had seen a post on LinkedIn that SIMO was Snow and Ice Management Symposium was coming to Pittsburgh, where I'm from, in 2024. And I was like, okay, and they were looking for speakers. And I was like, man, this would be so cool if I could like speak. And because, teaching training is part of what I do by trade. So that's really a strength of mine. I was like, if I could go speak there, because I'd spoke there in 2021, like this could be a launching point. But I was like, I don't think they're going to take somebody who's just been out of the industry for a couple of years. And it's like, hi, I work full time in Hub Services, but I had an idea. So I called my friend who I worked with. He was our operations manager, field manager in snow. So I was like, you're still in the industry. Maybe they'll take a proposal from both of us because you're still actively in the industry. So we put the proposal in, they accepted it. And we ended up going to the show, doing the teaching on recruiting a seasonal workforce. And, I ended up networking and, meeting a client I still work with today there and just, kind
Wow.
of really relaunching. And then from there, it got me, I just tried to look for any opportunity from there to just build relationships. That's why I reached out to you when you had reached out and, different avenues, because I really feel like that's my strength is a relationship side.
Yeah. And you mentioned a few minutes ago that it's a certain size of company that you're, helping. And
Mhm.
what do you mean by that? Can you define it a bit? Just it helps, everybody understand where you can do the most or have the most benefit.
Sure. So I think a couple things is one, you know, what I think defining first of all, what I do is, so what I do is, anything when I say people trades, I think some people have thought, oh, trades, like what's your trade? Like, are you, you landscape architect? Are you a plumber? I'm like, whoa, 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 no, people. So people meaning, my trades is really helping companies with recruiting, setting up recruiting processes. I don't do recruiting itself because, full-time job, that's a full-time job. So, but I do have
Yeah.
connections that do, but I help set up recruiting processes, train recruiters. I also help with setting up onboarding processes, and anything I help set up, I can also train the team on. So setting up trainings, offering trainings, working with leaders on succession planning, leadership development, employee engagement. So how do you measure, how engaged your team is, and then how do you really action and that to make sure they're more engaged. So the companies I would say I help, is probably those I found those that are either like on EOS or a similar type system, or at least interested in how do I better my processes, probably can benefit the most from me because your mindset's already there. So I think as an owner, to get the most out of someone like me, you've got to be committed because here's the thing, I'm not going to come in with a magic bullet where I drop something and it magically changes your business. Will I be a guide that helps you change your business for the better? Absolutely. But the work is still going to be there and commitment and follow through on the systems. But if you're already there of like, hey, we're putting in systems, we just need to know from the people side some specifics of what we do and some strategy that's based in data, that's based in results, then I can definitely be of help. So I hope that kind of filled in a little bit.
Yeah, I think that does. And I think the people side of the business is hard. It's not, especially when, a lot of companies in our industry start out as, owner operator
Mm.
and grow organically into a bigger company. I think there's always a point where you're like, you know, all I'm trying to do is build a team that works and that works together. And it's hard to know how to do that when you started as an owner operator, and you were working day to day with the people that you're, growing your company with. And then at some point you're not with them every day. Like there's all these stages as a company grows. So yeah, I appreciate what you bring to the table is a really important part of scaling.
Yeah, definitely. And like you said about the people being complex, one of the things I had in my notes before this is, labor represents about 30 to 50% of the landscape business's total cost. So really next to equipment and fuel, these are like your two biggest costs. I think the big differentiator is with equipment in general, machines are machines, you know what I mean? I don't mean to
They
down the
don't get their
machine side.
feelings hurt.
Yeah, exactly. And generally, it's like if the check engine light comes on, you run the diagnostic. There are certain ways you fix things. It's either, there's obviously different fixes you can do, but generally it's like if you do this fix or you put this fuel or this type of, fluid or whatever the machine takes, in it, it's going to operate. So it's consistent in that aspect.
Or you
People,
bring it to a mechanic.
yeah, whereas people, on the other hand, as you know, are anything but that. There's some people that you can use positivity and motivation and can be like, yes, you can do it, go for it. And it's going to rah rah. There's some people you do that with, and they're just going to think, oh, he's a patsy. Like, I don't have to do anything. Versus on the other side, there's some people that you can bring that, you know, motivation. Like, I don't think there's any way you can get this done. And they're going to be like, watch me, I got it. But there's somebody else that's going to be like, there's no way you can get this done. They're going to break down. They'll be like, why did you give this to me? And it's, so I say that to say people
Too
are so
much.
much more complex.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, I know. I'm just a lot of scenarios are going through my head as well, like problems that I've had in the past. Yeah, it is much more complex. Well, and you were just at SIMA as well. So this
Yes,
is
I
good
was.
timing, huh? Another go at that conference. I've heard lots of great things about it. Were you giving a talk there this time?
I was. So we actually, John Macharko and I, we had worked together in the past, he was So, he was the field captain. I was like the, recruiting office dispatch side. So I kind of always said he was like the football, he was a middle linebacker on the field, calling the plays in the middle of the action, feeling the flow of the storm, making adjustments, seeing what was and wasn't working, seeing how the guys around him were. Whereas I was like the defensive coordinator in the booth, game plan in front of me, prep done, able to see it from 10,000 feet to kind of say, like, hey, look, I see what's happening here. So, I think we need to make this adjustment, because sometimes when you're in it, you don't see that 10,000-foot view as well. So, what we were talking about, we did seasonal recruitment last year. This year, we did seasonal retention. So, I really talked about it from the Gallup Q12 employee engagement side, kind of what the research shows retains employees, and then making it practical for snow. And then he talked about more from the operational side, what that really looks like. What are some tangible things you can do, what he's seen work and doesn't work, because he's, led snow crews, been a snow captain. So he really knows that side.
That's fantastic. I love the football analogy. Because it's true. You need both. You need that 10,000-foot view, and you need to be able to adapt as things change, the situation changes, people change or have issues or something. Yeah, do you want to give us kind of a little snippet of that talk? Sorry,
No, that's
I'm
okay. Yeah.
ad-libbing.
So I guess I'll give, and this will be good, not only capping the talk, but for anyone who's listening on the snow side, and you can even apply this on the landscape or any trade side, really the two things. So I talked up through the Gallup Q12 engagement pyramid. So there's many different models on employee engagement. That's one I like the most, based because it's research tested. And for me, it also makes sense because I feel like they've done research of like what actions move the needle on different questions. So I really like that. And I've been able to apply that. So that's something I can do for companies. But to go to the talk, really the base of the pyramid is two things. One, I know what's expected of me at work. And number two, I have the materials and resources needed to do your job. So I talked about what that was. And then for a snow company, what I'd say is, with seasonal employees, knowing expectations, number one, that starts with a job description, and that starts with having a clear snow plan. So right now, while we're, it's June when we're recording this. So if you're listening soon, it's in the summer. Now is the time to really revisit those job descriptions, see, are they accurate? Do we have good checklists telling people what to do before storm, after storm? And do they know, really, have we painted a clear picture of success? Not just, hey, clear the sidewalk, but what does clear the sidewalk mean? Does it mean just brush some snow off? Does it mean throw de-icer down? Or does it mean curb to curb, it needs to be clean to this point, and we need to have snow piles in this area? Or if we're going to brush it into the lot, we need to communicate with the operator of, hey, snow pile coming, you got to take this away. So really painting that clear picture of success. And then number two, I have the materials and equipment needed to do the job. Is, obviously making sure they have, working equipment, making sure they have their, PPE, high vis gear, the equipment is in good condition, it's tested, there's troubleshooting for it, because that actually has been shown, according to research, to be the biggest source of frustration on the job, is not having the materials and resources needed to do your job. Because it's kind of like, okay, go on a deep sea, I want you to go on a deep sea dive and dive down to, 200 meters. It's like, I can know what you want, but if I don't have a tank, and again, I'm making up this analogy on the fly. So if somebody actually is into scuba, and this isn't exactly accurate, part of it, but if I'm going beyond where I can hold my breath and I don't have a tank and you want me to stay down there, I can know what you want me to do perfectly clear, but I don't have the equipment to do it properly. So I'm putting myself in danger, and
In
ultimately
danger.
I'm not going to accomplish the task you want me to. So
And you're going to be frustrated,
yeah,
and you're actually not going to want to be at work. You're not going to want to get up the next morning and go to this place that you feel so unprepared
yeah.
for.
And
Yeah.
part of preparation too is not only materials and equipment, but also part of that to do your job is information. So for example, I'll share an example I ran into when I was in the industry, and it was a good learning point for me to learn to ask more questions. But I was told, we had a property, and our owner was like, hey, we need a skid, we need just skid steer operator. As long as they're available, that'll be good. So I was like, okay, well, I'll just make sure I get someone with availability. Well, then during the season, So this was for an area of Southside Works in Pittsburgh. So it was the area where it was like a cheesecake factory, a movie theater, a lot of foot traffic, needed to get in a lot of detail work, sidewalks. And, we were getting some complaints on service and whatnot. I remember, after a few times through, I kind of, talked to him like, this seems like this is a pretty high priority client. This also seems like they're really wanting a lot of attention. When you had told me originally, you're like, just get anybody, you know, had you told me this was
Yeah.
had I known, had I had the information that this was high priority, I would have prioritized what operators we put here because, obviously knowing this is high priority, we need somebody who's high skilled. We need somebody who's trained. We need somebody who
A good
cares.
communicator.
Yeah,
Yeah.
communicator is going to go that extra mile. So I share that to Sharon. I don't want to bag on him because I'm sure, a lot of business owners deal with this. You're moving so fast in what you're doing. Sometimes it's like, I'll
You're
tell
juggling
somebody
a lot of
something
things.
and you
Yeah.
don't always think, but I think that's where stepping back, like from a snow side, I'd say on information is really stepping back and looking at what the customers need. Like, what are your zero tolerance sites? Where are your high customer expectations? Who's going to want a lot of documentation and, really being able to give that information because for me, that was a source of frustration because then it's like, okay, had I had this information, I could have prepared better. I could have recruited and placed differently. Now because obviously when you place, you have to train. So it kind of had a negative downhill. So I think from an information side, like if a client communicates something with you as leadership, making sure that communication gets down to your team and they're clear on that. Because if they don't have that information and then you're like, hey, you didn't attend to this area, and it's like, oh, well, that never made it down to us. That's going to be a source of frustration because then they're going to be taking a grenade, so to speak, for something that they didn't know was supposed to happen.
Yeah. And I mean, that's a great example of how complicated our industry is. We're dealing with so many uncertain factors like weather and people on the site that we're, unexpected, like, yeah, maybe more people than you expected to be on site because it's a public
Mhm.
area. Like those kind of things take a lot of finesse and, yeah, consideration if you're deciding who to put on what job.
100%. Yeah. And I think that's where the planning, and that's where I think a lot of people too, which I'll shout out all the snow fighters and snow companies out here. A lot of, people who aren't in the industry always ask the question like, what do you guys do in the summer? Like, and I look at it this way, it's like there's preparation again, almost back to the football analogy. Like when you're in a football game, once that ball snapped, you don't have time to think about, wait a second, let me think, how many steps is my drop on this play? Where are my receivers going? Hold on, let me stop and look. Like you've got to know that and be able to look and make split-second decisions off all the practice and all the tape study you've done because it's like you said, it's coming at you fast and unpredictable. Same thing with weather, you know what I mean? You don't have time to sit there and think, okay, well, now that we're on site and the snow's coming down, let's call each other and say, what are the priority areas on this site? Like you have to know those.
You have to
You have to
know it.
know this is the time
Yeah.
of day, this is the priority area. So I think that's where that training comes into play so much because, it's almost like, practicing. I had heard some people at SIMA say like, some of this stuff was, review. And they said, it was good review. And my kind of response to that, which I'm glad I get to, speak on this because I was going to share this on my own channel too, is, you know, you look at pro athletes, how many, Peyton Manning, when he played, would throw how many, hundreds of balls before and after practice with receivers. Now, obviously, it was review. He's thrown a football before. Sidney Crosby from the Penguins, where I'm from in Pittsburgh, said after, I can't remember if it was like 100, I think it was like 100, he would go through, review his tape. Every shot he shot that he didn't score on in a game, he would take 100 shots from that point on the ice because he said, I want to get to the point where next time that happens, it's muscle memory that I know how I'm supposed to shoot. Now, obviously, Sidney Crosby shot a puck before. He scored tons of goals. He's one of the best players ever played. But I think if that attitude is in pro athletes who play a game for a cup and a championship, I look at snow removal as we're an emergency response business who, lives are on the line. Ambulance response time at a hospital is on the line. access to utilities or access to essential goods and food and things people need to keep moving, access to safety for those that are handicapped or disabled is on the line. So to me, the repetition, we should be having repetition. We should be, amateurs practice till you get it right. Professionals practice till you can't get it wrong. So I think we should be, and shout out to those who are. I know a lot of companies are in that practice till we can't get it wrong. So, definitely shout out to those that are.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the actual mechanics and the job plan, that. So when you throw an unexpected, weather uncertainty or people or anything that could go wrong that you can't control, at least you have the plan down and then you can pivot as needed. Yeah. I think,
100%.
no, it's really interesting to hear about, how much planning and knowing the people that you put on each job, how important it is. I mean, it sounds like quite a all-encompassing job that you could need to do for your role. And you're doing this for companies now, and helping them in different ways.
Yeah.
Tell us
So,
what you're doing, yeah,
yeah.
for
So
companies now.
what I do now with Jack of all people trades is I'm on the, HR people consulting side. So what I help with is, for example, recruiting. I help build recruiting processes, really defining, because a lot of times companies, they think, okay, we need people, like get this job out and get posted, but there's more to recruiting than just posting a job. It's even preparing, like, how do you actually define a job, knowing what you're looking for? How do you research out there to make sure you're paying good market rate, to make sure you're positioning yourself well? And then not only with job posting, a lot of things, and this is a good takeaway for anybody who is recruiting for, snow, landscape, trades, anything. When you're posting jobs, all you're getting is people that are actively looking at job boards. So who you're not getting in front of is people that are satisfied in their jobs. Maybe they're growing at a company and would be interested in a move for a greater position or greater responsibilities, but they're not actively looking because they're happy. But if they're approached, they might think about it. So that's where things like passive candidates come in. And so I coach on, like, what tools you can use for that, what networks you can use. And also I coach on interview training, because interview training is one thing. And it's one thing, kind of like you mentioned earlier, Angelique, about, you're an owner operator and then you're expected to be a business owner with this people expertise that you weren't trained on. And I empathize with the owner operator, because that's not fair in a way. It's kind of like not provide, in the workplace, a classic example of promoting the best salesperson or the best technical engineer to management and not actually giving them management or leadership training. So in a way, it's almost like the system, without somebody like myself and others who can really upskill, and, credit to Sima as an org and others, podcasts like yours and others out there that have helped in that way. But without that, kind of interviewing is another thing that, they tell you to do, you need to do, but nobody really teaches how do you actually interview right? Because, I think everybody, including myself, can tell horror stories of times you thought you had that great candidate or that great person, and then you realize when they get on the job, they really didn't have the goods, or there were things in their response. And sometimes it might even be things you look back in the interview, and I've been guilty of this. So I don't want to, one thing I don't want to do is act like I'm on a high horse. A lot of what I've learned is learning from experience. So that's one thing I would say on the people side: always learn from experience and get better the next time. Because I've had my, you know, times where I'd hire somebody, I kind of look back and I'm like, you know what? I saw that attitude in the interview. I saw that they weren't a cultural fit, and I excused it because of their skills, and I shouldn't have. And now it's costing us, because now we have to make the decision on the other end. So yeah, that's to get back to your question. I know I'm dovetailing a little bit, but I help with like that recruiting process, kind of all that goes into it. Also training the team. Also, even if you're a company that says like, hey, we want somebody to take on recruiting, but they don't really have experience, that's something I can train somebody on, like your office staff, if they have the acumen and the go-getterness for that, to really level up to that. Also, again, one thing I'm passionate about too is I feel like a lot of companies focus on, want to recruit, we want to hire the best people over here, which is, yes, that's a great first step, but you also need to onboard well, you need to develop and train well. and you need to have good employee engagement and retention strategies too, where you're monitoring that and working actively to retain staff. And I can help both train and put those processes in place because again, as an owner operator, you're dealing with the day to day. There's a lot that goes into this, just like with snow. Like you said, there's a lot that goes in that people don't think about. There's a lot that goes in on the people side that people don't really think about. So that's where somebody like myself, and I do also empathize because you're in fact feel I can be effective, is as an owner operator, you don't always have time during the heat of the day, whether it's landscape, hardscape, snow, to step aside and spend hours addressing this. So start with somebody who has experience addressing it, sit with, let me pick your brain on what you really need and come back and collaborate with your team to put it in place over time. And then really, I look at it this way. I'm the guide. You as the company owner and the crews, you're the champions. You're the ones who are making it happen.
Well, and you boil it down and it is processes and how that fits into the business and building a system for your people side. I
Yes.
mean, labor has always been an issue in the landscape, hardscape, snow industries. Well, I mean, you tell me, in the snow industry as well, or as much as landscaping and hardscaping, or would you say?
Yes, absolutely yes on snow. And the reason being, if you think about it several ways, one, you have several unpredictable factors with snow that you don't even have. I mean, and I don't say this to down landscape and hardscape because there are their own challenges there as well, especially with the kind of heat wave we're having now. But with snow, what you have is several challenges. One, you don't know if it's even going to snow at all or when. So you're essentially,
Your own
I would
call.
definitely suggest anybody self-performing snow be doing other services in the off season so that you have some full-time labor as a good base, as a good starting point that can be your field
Your
supervisors and your
core.
salt truck drivers, your core, yeah. But even among the core, you need more people than just the core to do the operations. You need people for every machine. You need a sidewalk crew, shovelers, people running your snow raiders, your vent tracks. So all that you need. So between the unpredictability, the not knowing when it's going to snow, and people, that was one thing I was told when I started was, don't worry, people are laid off during the winter, they don't work. That may used to have been the case back in the days, but it definitely is not the case now. I mean, people are working right up to a snowstorm. It's like snow could be coming the next day. They might be, doing landscaping or doing a job, finishing up a job somewhere the day before. So with that, I say there's a lot of unpredictability. So it is tough. And I think that's also where having a good people system and training somebody to be like your winter captain, because that's a piece that I think see a lot of places missing, even in conversations at SIMA, as people would talk about, well, I had these people hired and then, they got called back to work and da da da. So it's constantly a chessboard that's always moving, and you always got to be recruiting and resetting and calibrating. So yeah, it's definitely a challenge, and I empathize with every company dealing with it.
But you're right. Um, it can affect morale if you're laying off people and trying to hire them back. And but these industries have always had labor problems. It has gotten worse, I think, through COVID, or more challenging. But I don't think it's something that's going away ever. I feel like what you're talking about is making the people side of things easier to deal with in the company, better for everybody, better for management, better for the people themselves, better for being prepared. It's funny how it's every part of the business really, because we are businesses made of people doing challenging work and dealing with weather and unpredictability. I think it needs to be such a core part of every business. So you might be really, really busy soon.
Yeah, definitely. And I would look forward to that because I do agree that it is a challenge. And one model that I've always liked, and that this was actually given to me by an auditor when I was in banking. I'll probably have to reach out to him. Shout out Tom, wherever you are. I might send this to you and reconnect with you on LinkedIn after this. But he would basically say is in business, you have unmitigated risk, which is, if you do nothing, this is the worst that's going to go wrong. So, like, obviously in snow, unmitigated risk is, no people to operate, you're not doing any service and all the bad that can happen. And then you have what you call controls, which is what you put in as a business to do. So your controls would be hiring, training, dispatching, administering service. And then you get to mitigated risk. And he said, you never get to no risk, but you get to mitigated risk. So you get to reducing or mitigating that risk. And I think on the people side, that's where I come in with things like, for example, with snow, one thing with, one of your unmitigated risks is the unpredictability and people not being available when, even after you hire them and have interviewed them. So one control you can put in is having somebody in your office that is tracking availability, doing weekly check-ins with the team, sending out some training tips, keeping them engaged, even if you don't have snow, keeping the communication high using, there's softwares that do that. Shout out to Team Engine, who's a partner of mine. I'm a partner of theirs. So like they have texting software, there's others out there, but stuff like that can keep that communication high. So at least your risk is now mitigated, that even if people went back to work, it now internally, proactively, so you can, up your job ads, or you can start making more calls, passive recruiting, or you can reach out to your network and get referrals. And you can also even staff the job sites differently. It's like, hey, these two A players, got called to jobs in other states. How do we want to restack the board now?
Yeah. Yeah. Because it's knowing each person's skill sets and putting them in the right part of the game. Going back to football. This
Yeah,
is great.
absolutely.
Well, let's see we've talked a lot about what I had on my list as questions. You've given some examples. Are there any, you know, I guess words of wisdom or advice that you would give to our audience that are listening in to this podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. I think from the trade side, I can speak especially to the snow and landscape more, but even to the trade side as a whole, I would say I empathize with, the fires of the day, and that might be consuming you. So I don't want to downplay that or mitigate that. You're putting a lot on the line with your business and your risk. But I will say from the people side, it is going to be more investment up front, but you do have to look at it as planting seeds, because if you think about, I shared the two big expenses at the beginning to kind of tie it together. Things like machines and equipment, those are depreciating assets that, yeah, you can do things to preserve a little bit and get the most out of them, but they depreciate. People, if you invest in them right, can be very much appreciating assets. So they're people that, yes, taking that time for extra training, taking those extra hours, maybe, slowing down a little bit to put a process in place, maybe hiring somebody, whether it's, myself on a contractual basis or somebody full-time on your staff to, do that, or given that responsibility to an admin, may cost you a little bit, may set you back a little bit here. But if you appreciate and get the most out of every person on your team, you're going to go exponentially farther. You're going to be able to retain. I think one thing, this is really a heart I have too for the snow and landscape and trade companies. I think you have an opportunity in this economy to retain, because I had mentioned about layoffs, for myself from, big tech and bigger companies, a lot that are, really answering to shareholders or private equity that are laying off. I'm not saying everyone who does answers to shareholders or private equity does this, but there's a portion that is literally doing mass layoffs just to increase stock prices or increase, owner revenue. And in the trades, we have that chance to provide stability, especially these privately owned businesses. You have a chance to provide stability for a workforce that, I think people are craving more and more. And, my encouragement to those who also, are in the cycle, I empathize with those who go through that layoff cycle again and again. Like, I would encourage you, look at the trades, even if it's not the trade side itself, even if it's the office side, the admin side, like, look there and look differently. And to those, in the trades, be open to people who have the right heart and the right work ethic, even if they don't necessarily come from your industry. So I say that to say, I think we can be a really healing revolution on the job side of getting back to, the dignity of work and getting back to, respecting people and getting the most out of people. And, shout out to the companies that do it right. I know the one I'm with full time, absolutely is doing the right thing. And, those a lot of who I've worked with are doing the right thing. So like let's keep that going.
Yeah. I like what you said about they have the work ethic and the heart, if I'm summarizing right, but we can teach them the skills.
Yeah.
If they're the right personality and work ethic, that's probably, yeah, much more of the right person to hire, even without the skills. Yeah, I
100%.
totally
Yes.
agree with that. You can't teach work ethic.
No, yeah, work ethic and values and alignment, that's got to be there. But if you learn how to interview for that and make sure that's there, things like skills, I mean, obviously there's certain skills you need for especially higher level jobs, but at your entry level jobs, certain skills can be taught, and also look for certain skills. If somebody's detail oriented, I've seen people, it's like, well, they have experience in this industry or this system. I'm like, if they've worked a CRM in one system, they can figure yours out. Like, you'll be okay.
Exactly. Exactly. Yes. And, I think there's a great future in bringing people from outside the industry. I mean, you talked about all the different industries you've worked in. It actually opens your eyes to doing things maybe in a different, maybe a better way. It's bringing new ideas into our industry, which can help us, learn to do things a better way. I was in a different industry before, and some of the things that I want to build in sync or from my oil industry days. I think there's a lot of value in cross industry learning. Yeah. I mean, I can't even remember how many industries you've worked in, but it's 5. Okay. Yeah, 5 different industries. That gives you're well placed to look from a 10,000-foot vantage point.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, that really helps your insight.
100%. The one thing I've learned from on the people side of 5 different industries is the core things of like what engages people, what drives people, how you motivate and manage people. While there's differences in how that applies on each job, a lot of the core things are the same. Like, I've done disc across different industries. D driven personalities are D driven personalities in any industry. Your detail C, how you communicate with that detail person is the same. How you communicate with your outgoing or your steady state, same. It might be what you're communicating about is different. The overall pace might be a little bit different, but a lot of the core of people is really the same.
Wow, I feel like you might have a magic ball.
Well, it's a sure. Maybe I am a people magician. I don't know. No, I think I'll say this. What I think my magic ball is, and this is a good, piece of feedback to even, close with and walk away with for owners is feedback and learning and improvement. I feel like if you take feedback and act on it from your team, and that doesn't mean act on does not mean you do everything they suggest you do, but it means you account for, and even if you can't do something, you explain why. It's like, hey, look, I understand that, in the snow example, you might not want to get out and do these steps. But here's the thing, that's part of our scope of work. That's an essential safety area. What we're going to do is rotate people through. So not the same person always has to do it, but we do have to do it. So I ask that you be part of the team. And sometimes even in that no, explaining the why can really energize. But I share that to share that getting and acting on feedback from your team, whether you implement good ideas or explain ones you can't, and then also consistent improvement. A lot of what I talk about, I may sound like I'm talking from a magic ball, but a lot of it, even the thing about like operator availability, scheduling, communication, I had to learn because I've had snafus. I've had times where I didn't communicate with my team well, and they were expecting a certain operator here, and I'm like, oh no, I sent them over there. So I had to stop and say, wait a second, how are we all making a game plan together so that we're all on the same page? So I've learned from many times falling on my face. So I don't want to sit here and act like, you know, I've been perfect or I haven't. No, constantly learn and improve and get feedback. That's, you want a magic ball? There's your magic ball.
Love it. Well, Evan, thank you so much for joining us today and look forward to meeting you in person sometime soon too.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, join us again. That was Evan Tachoir Hopefully I said that right again. You have a tough one, but jack of all people trades. Look him up on LinkedIn. And Evan, we can put some in the show notes. We can put how to contact you. So yeah, please send me those details and see you again next time.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Evan.